it is what it is, right? And I think we're not making any legal conclusions. That's not our job. Our job is to put out there what the facts are, what the truth is, and let the attorneys conclude what they may.
When you know something and you're putting these things together and you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is one of the biggest things in the world.
And this is a story about people who are saying one thing and something else is going on behind the scenes.
Part of what my NGO does is we work with kids from exceptional young people from extreme circumstance.
Who are you when you're off camera? Who are you in the dark?
I don't think I'd want someone to make a film about my nonprofit. You don't want to see the sausage being made.
Because we don't believe victims. We don't believe the less powerful person ever.
This whole time, it's been in plain sight.
Have things that are hidden be made visible. At least you can see the snake now. This is big, right? This is big. How far does this thing go?
What if your greatest enemy was camouflaged, posing in your life? Perhaps your closest confidant, a family member, or a favorite politician. Exploiting your weaknesses, sabotaging your goals, learning your vulnerabilities. And what would you do if they framed you for a crime you didn't commit? What would you do if they turned your friends against you, convinced everyone you were delusional? And what would you do if they hired a lawyer to weaponize a cease and desist against you? Would you stay quiet? What would you do if no one believed you? How far would they go for a lie? And how far would you go for the truth? A true psychological horror story about how our society is shaped, not by left or right, man or woman, religious or secular, but by predators and prey. Follow me down a rabbit hole of manipulation, power, and psychological warfare, where reality is constructed, not communicated. A journey that reshaped my entire understanding of trust, credibility, and ultimately had me asking, what does it even mean to be human? A story of deception, manipulation, and power so sophisticated and orchestrated, it's almost like it was scripted. This is The Unraveling. Cori Shepherd Stern is on her way to the Telluride Film Festival for the premiere of her latest film, Zaraski vs. Texas. She sends me an uncharacteristically long text. It nearly fills the screen, and my first thought is panic. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. It's a CPTSD symptom called catastrophizing, and I am good at it. I hadn't fully let down my guard with her yet. From a show perspective, I definitely trusted her to tell my story and to do it right. But did she want to be actual friends with me? Or did she just feel obligated to be nice to me because I'm in the film? I didn't want to incorrectly mistake her professional interest for personal interest. Luckily, her text is a reaffirmation of her desire for a personal friendship, and she lets me know that she's holding back because of her role as my director, but that's only temporary. We chatted over text throughout the weekend, and she sends me a news article about the premiere. The film explores the fallout of Texas's barbaric anti-abortion laws and the women fighting back against the system. Secretary Hillary Clinton and Dr. Chelsea Clinton are executive producers of the film. They appear as part of a panel Q&A after the premiere. I'm not going to lie, I was impressed. The film itself was important and compelling, but having a direct working relationship with the Clintons was on a whole nother level. We talked about the film afterwards. When I told her I loved a particular music cue in the film, she said it was her favorite too. In fact, she claimed that she sat right next to the composer at the premiere and told him so. Then she compared me to one of the main characters, calling us both warriors. The mirroring is constantly off the charts, and honestly, I'm loving it. No one has ever mirrored me this intensely before. Everything I loved, she loved. Every opinion I had, she backed up. It was like staring into the heat of my own sun. When I go back to the old text to verify my memories, something new jumps out. In my last messages in that thread, I tell her that the ending of the film was really powerful. The main character defiant and determined, looking straight into the camera. I can't help but notice that's exactly how she ends the docuseries I'm in, but this time I'm the defiant and determined one looking straight at the camera. Is this yet another idea cribbed from my notes? Because that list is starting to get really long. My very first reaction when I finished watching the series for the first time was shock. I had no idea I would be featured that prominently. After the show's intro, I get a hero's entrance, I give the narrator's perspective, and then the show ends on my closing lines. It's a lot to take in, especially because for the last few weeks, no one at the production company would respond to any of my questions. And I was excluded from the cast group chat and the cast emails where they were given advanced trailers and social media assets. Realizing I had been lied to personally left me reeling, anxiously wondering whether I'd also been lied to professionally. What exactly was this film going to be about? Amazon won't give me any assurances or an early preview, so I'm left to dangle for weeks. Shunned and isolated again. Well, not totally, because in an ironic twist of fate no one could have predicted, the one cast member standing firmly in my corner now was not any one of the folks who had gone through the program with me, who had known me for decades. It wasn't any of the other interns who benefited from my work taking down Teen Mania. It was Cindy Millette, originally hired by Teen Mania to bury me in the press. We were arch enemies, nemesis, until one fateful day when she realized I was telling the truth. And without ever telling me about it, she launched her own campaign from the inside to expose the financial mismanagement. I hadn't ever even spoken to her until the day of filming, and now she's the only person I can count on. I walk around in near constant shock at the way the tables have turned. I spent months working closely with the director under the guise of a deep soul friendship based in a labor of love and a belief in the mission of this work. She told me that she worked more than 12-hour days almost every day of the week for a whole year and for only $30,000. She was working for less than minimum wage and I was working for free. But we were both doing it because we believed in it, right? Now, before you scoff at how naive I am to believe that, keep in mind, she had been grooming me for weeks by that time, constantly mirroring my energy. And working for peanuts or free for something I believe in is absolutely something I have done many times and would do again. And in fact, it's something I'm doing right now, literally as I speak. So no, within that context, it wasn't hard for me to believe that she was doing this as a labor of love and not just for a payday. But even without that grooming, judge for yourself. Is she persuasive?
If you don't have that drive, this industry is just too hard. You have to have that drive, whether you get paid or not. Everybody thinks producers walk around with big cigars and are like, hey, the kid stays in the picture, but like it is thankless in a lot of cases. You can work for years and not get paid. Don't get me started. People think producers make tons of money. You don't. And I mean, the very, very top ones do. But by and large, we don't have any labor protections. We don't have anything like that. I can do a budget and literally everyone can get paid and I cannot get paid until the very end. So if you want to do this work, you have to be motivated by something else. Don't come with like dollar signs in your eyes like a cartoon. You've got to be like, I have to tell this story.
To spend hours working on a project, literally day and night for months, and to give that freely to the collective from my heart, and then to suddenly be treated as a pariah and a problem, as if I'm deranged for noticing all the ways that my work was co-opted under false pretenses. I was originally told that Shining Happy People Season 2 would cover 3 different organizations, not just Teen Mania. Teen Mania would be 1/3 of the show, and I would be a small part of that third. But that's not what happened, is it? And when I noticed that change, and I asked about it directly, I was blown off. When I knew that the film was inspired by me and based on me, suddenly my number is blocked and I'm a stalker because I want some answers. If I'm at the mall and someone comes by and steals my purse, you best be sure I'm going to chase them down. Now, if they happen to get a head start because I don't notice right away, and they manage to walk cool, calm, and collected into the fancy department store, and then I come in behind them, I'm huffing, puffing, and sweating and yelling, hey, that lady stole my purse. Who do you think they're going to believe?
Because we don't believe victims. We don't believe the less powerful person ever, rarely, and certainly not in this situation.
And when that purse thief points at me and accuses me of chasing her and trying to steal her purse, well, maybe you could forgive a little outburst on my part at the bitter injustice of that. But the truth is, we could easily fix the situation by just opening up the purse to find out whose belongings are already inside. After our first call on Zoom, when I agreed to provide background and context and not to appear on camera, I sent this email as a follow-up. I'm just going to read part of it because it's quite long. Quote, "You didn't ask and we didn't touch on it, so I don't know if you will include this aspect, but I was raised in the type of non-denominational church that was heavily focused on the end times. The ideas of taking over the culture and or martyrdom, which you would think are mutually exclusive, were very fundamentally influenced by the idea that the end is very near. I always expected to die young, either by martyrdom or whatever end time situation I was going to have to endure. I think most parents think about their kids' lives in terms of setting them up for success, but at least in my circles, there was no bright future. The future was bleak, and you needed to know how to survive it and still make it to heaven." One thing I don't think secular Americans understand at all is that their right-wing Christian neighbors don't see them as equals. If you are not in their club, your opinion is basically from Satan himself, and if they listen to you, they are listening to Satan. They are not interested in coexisting in a meritocracy, and you fundamentally can't live in a cooperative society with people who refuse to cooperate with you. I wish you all the luck in the world for your upcoming shoots and just wanted to thank you for your incredibly kind words today. When I tell my story, I'm used to being disbelieved, even when it's good-natured shock and disbelief at how extreme it was. That's why I'm not usually eager to bring it up for discussion. It's difficult for people to wrap their minds around horrific things, and there are few people in the world willing and able to do that work. But when it does happen, it's incredibly meaningful for survivors to not have to be completely alone in our pain. I have not been fortunate enough in my life to be around very many people who really see me and believe me, but I felt that you and your team did that, and that was so incredibly validating to me. So thank you for that. In the months following my interview, I swapped hundreds of emails with production and thousands of texts with the director. Every week or two, it seemed like the team needed me to join a multi-hour Zoom call where they peppered me with questions. It was starting to feel like an extended fishing expedition. They'd ask me a question and have me run with it until they got something that they liked or an answer that would fit. Honestly, it became exhausting, and it was a lot of pressure trying to come up with salient talking points after a long working day at my regular full-time job. And keeping all of the Teen Mania history at the forefront of my mind for months on end, that wasn't something I had bargained for. It had been taking over my life, and I was ready for a break. Finally, I said something to the director, and we never had another call after that. I think she realized I was close to catching on, that she didn't really have the ideas or the expertise to make the show work. She was depending on me to fill in the blanks. It's the same thing that happened last season with former college professor Brooke Arnold. Brooke was the first person to make the connection between the Duggars and IBLP when she wrote an article about it, published in Salon. But I had been warned to stay away from Brooke, who she had previously been in love with and had her heart broken by, and who she now said was troubled. I didn't have any reason to reach out to Brooke, and I didn't have any reason to disbelieve the director. Or so I thought. In the last episode, we explored the origins of the director's career at Saban Entertainment.
He's scary. He taught me how to be scary.
Her most notable credit was creating Breaker High, a one-season show that aired in 1997 featuring a young Ryan Gosling. In an article published on CNN, Gosling said his least favorite part of the job was experiencing on-set harassment and verbal abuse. You can check out last week's episode if you missed it. The following year, Haim Saban teamed up with Rupert Murdoch to launch the Fox Family Channel. To help build the programming slate for the new network, the director was involved in talent scouting and budget oversight. One article even referred to her as a super agent. However, unlike most of Saban's projects, the Fox Family experiment struggled. Ratings were disastrous, falling by around 30%, and the network never recovered. By 2001, the company was bleeding money, and Saban exercised his option to sell. The Walt Disney Company bought the channel for more than $5 billion, with a B. A deal notable for three reasons. It was, at the time, the largest cash transaction ever executed by a single individual in Hollywood. 2, Disney shareholders criticized the purchase as an overpay by roughly $1 billion. And 3, the sale reportedly required personal diplomatic outreach from President Bill Clinton to finalize international clearances. Proof perhaps that time spent cultivating high-level connections does pay off. The sale closed on October 24th, 2001, securing lucrative severance packages for the network executives just weeks after 9/11, a time of deep economic uncertainty. So after years at a struggling network, with no breakout hits or major careers launched, the director leaves television with a generous payout. If only everyone landed so softly. Here's how the director tells it in an interview.
In the meantime, Disney ended up buying Fox Family Channel, so they bought out my contract, and I ended up with a bunch of money.
Which explains the Rudolph Schindler house.
No. That money is all gone because I went to Nigeria in the middle of the AIDS crisis with AIDS drugs for a whole bunch of people. I went right from being a television executive to muling drugs to Africa.
The director reinvents herself and begins a second career as a sort of relief work producer, finding, promoting, and fundraising for traumatic stories of African children in need.
I was a refugee from the American television industry, as you can appreciate, and I wanted to take a break from the insanity of that, so I went to Nigeria, and I was applying my producerial skills to relief work.
In this interview with Eve Ettinger, a cast member of Shiny Happy People Season 1, she explains what a producer does.
A producer is like a person who drives past a vacant lot and sees the house that could be on it. You envision the house, find the architect / director who can build that house. You help them find the craftsman who can carry out the architect's vision, but you're the person that holds the big vision, and then you put the pieces together, and then yes, you herd cats. You're the overall person who's putting it all together.
So she finds the script or the story to tell, which is the child in need of treatment. Then she finds the director to turn that vision into a reality, which is the doctor or the medical team who will actually do the procedures. And then she turns to the logistics, fundraising for transportation costs, finding a host family, and coordinating everyone during the actual production. And then she gets it placed in the press. She consistently puts herself in high-stakes life-or-death situations, despite having zero medical experience or any documented training or qualifications to work with vulnerable, traumatized children in cross-cultural situations. According to her early blog posts, it all started one night when the director was browsing online. She stumbled upon a request for help from an orphanage in Africa. They were trapped behind enemy lines and running out of supplies. Her old blog posts document that she raised $25,000, and the pharmaceutical company allowed her to purchase the medicine at a wholesale price. So she got $105,000 worth of medicine for $25,000 cost. This trip is also her first taste of dealing with UN bureaucracy.
The UN AIDS office in Abidjan has agreed to receive the large medicine shipment for us. They are clearing all the customs paperwork, so it will be duty-free. The help we have received to achieve this reached into the highest levels of the UN in Ivory Coast.
Stepping back, these blog entries read more like a dramatic screenplay, a tense setup, rising action, a cliffhanger ending. This post ends with,
I may accompany the Red Cross truck carrying our shipment to the orphanage in Bouaké. This will mean going through what was rebel-held territory, so I am still uncertain. The medicine shipment is due to arrive there today. The Red Cross is still set to take it in. But the situation has become extremely dangerous. I read yesterday that every week, a humanitarian relief worker is killed somewhere in the world. Please send your prayers and support to these very brave people. I may accompany the Red Cross truck carrying our shipment to the orphanage in Bouaké. This will mean going through what was rebel-held territory, so I am still uncertain.
And the next entry heightens the suspense even more.
The medicine shipment is due to arrive there today. The Red Cross is still set to take it in, but the situation has become extremely dangerous. I read yesterday that every week, a humanitarian relief worker is killed somewhere in the world. Please send your prayers and support to these very brave people.
The words extremely, every, and please are in all caps. And this isn't a factually accurate statement. It's more of an emotional appeal. This post is leveraging fear and admiration to position her as a heroic figure facing mortal danger. It reads less like an accurate field report and more like a crafted narrative, a marketing myth masquerading as documentation. Just weeks after returning from her very first trip to the Ivory Coast, the director was already planning another trip to Africa. On her blog, she wrote,
"One of the amazing things that came out of the Ivory Coast experience was an offer from Passport Health of a donation of 3,000 influenza vaccinations, assuming I could find a place for them to go within the month. Nigeria, it is."
She goes on to talk about travel logistics, then says,
Also, National Geographic today is sending along a cameraman to cover the experience.
on the surface, it's an unusual story choice. Delivering routine flu vaccines isn't generally headline material, and she wasn't administering them herself. She was simply transporting the doses. But National Geographic coverage instantly transforms a logistics errand into a cinematic humanitarian adventure. If I took some vaccines to Africa, do you think I could get a film crew to follow me and cover it? It's unlikely. And at that point, there's no public record of her setting up a registered nonprofit, attending training, or establishing any formal oversight. But does any of that really matter? Because in America, camera time equals credibility. If National Geographic or ABC News is covering your work, you must be legitimate. Media validation itself becomes its own credential. And those credentials don't require following codes of conduct or maintaining licensing from accredited institutions.
Brought to you by Unconscious Conditioning. Tired of growth? Exhausted by change? With your unconscious conditioning, you don't have to. Just keep dating the same person in a different body, chasing the same approval from people who never gave it. Because deep down, you love the familiar misery. Ask your therapist if avoiding accountability is right for you.
In one online post, she introduces her National Geographic Today cameraman.
John is one of my favorite travel companions. He's a Nat Geo shooter who's also worked on Girls Gone Wild and Skateboard Docs. Nice work if you can get it. Great with a camera, and if we get attacked by bandits, John can ward them off with his blue steel gaze and his I'm a sexy animal tongue. Straight, but not single, chicas. Sorry.
There's no mention of his journalistic background or any vetting standards typical for documentary coverage. The description leans more flirtatious travel banter than professional reporting. That pattern recurs elsewhere. Her tone towards male collaborators sometimes carries a suggestive edge, casual but out of place in professional context. It reinforces the impression of someone performing a cinematic version of humanitarianism, complete with danger, sex appeal, and self-styled heroism. I can't find the Nat Geo video itself, but the online image she's creating via her blog is a sort of hard-scrabble, do-it-yourself humanitarian worker unafraid to tackle the hardest cases in the hardest places. She is a gritty, fearless solo operative, posing with armed soldiers and captioning, quote, "They are not here to protect me." Taken together, the message looks less like documenting humanitarian work and more like authoring a mythology. Each trip she takes is a stepping stone, providing new contacts and leads. The first one provides proof of her in action. The second one provides media coverage. And the third one, she starts recruiting volunteers.
10 days to change a life, to change your life, to change the world.
The phrasing echoed the familiar world changer rhetoric of organizations like Teen Mania, cult-like organization that I had escaped.
To change the world, make a difference with their lives.
Language that she had once mocked me for. She often implied that my desire to improve the world was naive, a relic of my religious upbringing. But for me, caring about humanity doesn't come from doctrine, it's instinctive. I don't need religion to tell me to care about others. The new project partnered with Dr. Arthur Ammon, the world-renowned pediatric immunologist who was the first to diagnose AIDS in children. Under his organization, Global Strategies for HIV Prevention, they worked together to launch a 4-day training workshop for birth attendants on reducing mother-to-child transmission of HIV/AIDS. He described meeting the director in his book, Lethal Decisions, The Unnecessary Deaths of Women and Children from HIV/AIDS.
Early in the morning of May 15, 2003, I received a phone call from Cori Stern. She had been on assignment in Nigeria for National Geographic when she came across Faith Alive, a clinic in Nigeria.
It's a striking sentence. According to Dr. Ammon's published book, she told him over the phone that she had been, quote, on assignment for National Geographic. So that trip to Nigeria with the flu vaccines, was she being covered by Nat Geo for a human interest story? Or was she on assignment for National Geographic? Because those 5 words carry extraordinary weight. they turn a self-directed volunteer trip into an official expedition, borrowing the authority and credibility of one of the most trusted brands in journalism. I can guarantee one thing. If she had been on assignment for National Geographic, she would have told us. The most I can find is a mention that her work has been covered by Nat Geo, in addition to a bunch of other outlets. It also raises an interesting question I hadn't considered. On the ground in Nigeria, what impression does the presence of a professional cameraman and the National Geographic name create? After all, walking into almost any environment with a camera crew and the words "on assignment for National Geographic" would open doors nearly anywhere. That kind of brand authority is its own passport, one that can grant instant access to people, places, and institutions that would otherwise be off limits. On a second read, I also notice how she name drops her record with the hospital and a specific doctor. That's part of the trick. The record becomes reality by simply repeating it. No proof of credentials necessary.
Episode brought to you by Unconscious Conditioning. Just keep doing the same thing over and over and never learn from your mistakes. I'm sure it will work out this time.
Her next workshop took place at a refugee camp in Ghana, where hundreds of orphan Liberian children were living without access to formal education. That's when ABC News named her their Person of the Week. Some of the camp's residents had already organized a makeshift school in a church, but space was limited and unreliable. After learning about this, the director announced a new 10 days mission, this time to help the refugees build a permanent school. I couldn't find the original video online, but I did find a transcript.
Cori Stern's spirit called her to the poorest corners of Africa, most recently to do humanitarian work at a refugee camp in Ghana. It's home to more than 40,000 displaced Liberians. I am passionate about Africa, she said. I'm passionate about the people here, but there's so much richness of spirit and of family and of community, and I feel like you should go where you're called to go. And this is where my spirit calls me.
It's unlikely that ABC producers happened upon the scene by chance. Primetime segments like Person of the Week are almost always prearranged through PR channels or existing media relationships. Even though this is a fluff piece devoid of hard news, it's still a primetime endorsement from ABC News. Each trip built another rung on an escalating ladder of publicity. First blogs and radio, then National Geographic, then ABC News. That publicity wasn't incidental, it was structural. It's what transformed personal travel into professional identity. Each expedition also produced new contacts, each one a potential source of credibility she could borrow, then leverage to gain access to the next. The first trip she took, under Knightsbridge International sponsorship, gave her proximity to the Red Cross and the UN. Those connections likely helped secure the donated vaccines that opened the doors to the doctors and hospitals in Nigeria, access that she could never get here at home. The legitimacy of those medical contacts helped her reach one of the most respected names in the field, Dr. Arthur Ammon, and with his endorsement, she raised money, recruited volunteers, and produced a workshop. That workshop led her to the UN refugee camp, which led to the school building project, which led to the national exposure of ABC's Person of the Week. Do you see the ladder? She understood something essential. Credibility is transferable. It isn't earned solely through training or demonstrating results. It can also be absorbed by proximity. I certainly fell for it. After all, if she's working with the Clintons, she must be legitimate. She moved through institutions the way a gymnast moves across monkey bars, each grasp pulling her higher. Only these bars weren't horizontal, they were vertical, leading upward through layers of power and prestige. Not content with an endorsement from a leading pediatric immunologist, she set her sights on what might be humanitarian's ultimate credential, Dr. Paul Farmer. Farmer was the Harvard-trained physician anthropologist who redefined global health equity. A MacArthur Fellow and a UN Special Advisor, he was co-founder of Partners in Health, one of the most respected humanitarian movements on Earth. And what better way to get close to someone than to make a film about them? Ask me how I know. She first reached out to him in 2005, and according to published interviews, was turned down. But she persisted relentlessly, and 5 years later, they reached an agreement. She would co-produce and feature documentary, later named Bending the Arc, chronicling Farmer's life work. The film premiered in 2017. They appeared at events promoting the film, on stage together before audiences that revere him. Farmer referred to her as a friend.
And I thought that was maybe a way of making her go away, but we've been friends basically ever since that terrible time.
During that same event, Cori told the audience what she found so special about Dr. Paul Farmer.
What stays with me is
the love involved in not averting their gaze. That the villains in this film, they're not so villainous. They were just doing what is the trend of the moment. Avert your gaze from this. You're not allowed to see that. So we don't consciously say the emperor has no clothes. And so I think that what stands with me is I'm just so in love with these people who didn't avert their gaze when the rest of the world says we don't see that they just consistently had the bravery to see the problem and really address the extent of it.
What some might consider an unimportant line, I noticed immediately as a through line in her pattern. It's a trait that both Lovetta and I shared as well. She was fascinated by people who saw the horrors of life and refused to look away. Being on stage with Paul Farmer as his colleague and friend was the ultimate professional endorsement. Moral credibility by association with the man whose name had become synonymous with compassion and rigor. And as an unexpected bonus, during the filming of Bending the Arc, President Obama would nominate Jim Yong Kim, a co-founder of Partners in Health, to become president of the World Bank, a position he would hold from 2012 to 2019. For her, this was the final rung on the ladder of borrowed legitimacy. Her personal and professional relationship with the world's most celebrated doctor had led to access to the head of the World Bank. Every previous affiliation, Red Cross, UN offices, medical missions, media coverage, had been leading to this. The transition from Hollywood executive to humanitarian insider was complete. Following her entire trajectory is a masterclass in social engineering. This twice homeless girl from Florida with big dreams but no connections has created her own network. She recognized that institutions vet each other, not the individual. And if each person or organization assumes that the last one vetted her, no one actually does. And that gap in accountability is wide enough for anyone determined enough and brazen enough to slip through. Because no single institution owns the whole process, responsibility just evaporates, disappears in the spaces between them. It's a system built on the illusion that credibility equals integrity. And the one thing that a system built on illusion can't stand? The truth. The year is 2005. Evelyn Apoko was a Ugandan teenager kidnapped by child soldiers and severely injured in a blast. Her survival story was exceptional, and the director loves exceptional people.
Okay, this is my big thing. Number one, recruit exceptional people. And it seems like recruit exceptional people, but really, go after the best. They are out there.
She arranged reconstructive surgeries and began building media campaigns around Evelyn's story of recovery. According to a CNN article,
Apoko arrived in America frightened and without speaking a word of English. Those who sheltered her here are amazed that she is the same woman who delivered a recorded message to Rush Limbaugh earlier this month. The LRA is not Christian, she told the talk show host. Joseph Kony and his commanders could hardly be considered human. In the video, Apoko wore a necklace bearing the name of an abducted child, part of a campaign to raise money and awareness.
That campaign, called the Name Campaign, became the centerpiece of a brand new initiative. While the director had fundraised before, this was her first attempt at merchandising trauma. This NPR story lays it out.
Evelyn is shy, but Cori Stern coaxes her into recalling the pain she suffered as a human shield for the LRA.
How many operations have you had?
I have 2 in Uganda.
And you have how many to go?
6.
Stern says the Name Campaign wants to bring other Ugandan children to the U.S. for medical treatment. But she wonders if she can get Hollywood's attention for yet another African humanitarian crisis.
That's a revealing quote. Why Hollywood's attention? What role does celebrity awareness actually play in solving complex global problems? And how does she manage to get so much of it anyway? Soon, Evelyn was appearing on various news outlets, Discovery TV, and even Oprah. The dog tag necklaces were promoted as awareness tools, but it's unclear what the money actually goes to other than a vague raising awareness. Coincidentally, the idea of raising awareness emphasizes inspiration and visibility, the same ingredients that drive film and television storytelling. Until 2005, the director's projects operated under the umbrella of Creative Visions Foundation, a California nonprofit. I looked for their financial filings online, but I couldn't find anything prior to 2009. So there's no way to know how much money the Name Campaign took in or what it was spent on. In 2006, she registers her own nonprofit organization, Strong Heart Fellowship. The official paperwork describes it as,
the specific purpose of this corporation is a social entrepreneurship residency program designed to develop exceptional young people from extremely challenging circumstances into leaders that can affect significant social change.
So a residency program where a minor works full-time because they want to affect change. A program to become a world changer, if you will. Where have I heard that before? This is starting to feel eerily familiar. Do you remember the human interest stories that used to air at the end of local news? They seem uplifting at first, like 7-year-old boy sells lemonade to pay for his dad's cancer treatment. And it's supposed to be heartwarming, but when you think about it for more than 5 seconds, you realize it's actually horrifically traumatic for that kid. It's not heartwarming at all. It's just a story of a kid being forced into the adult world with adult anxieties and pressures way before they should be. Anyway, that's what came to mind when I read the Los Angeles Times article about Lovetta Conto, the first recruit to Strongheart.
Lovetta Conto gives new meaning to the saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. The 15-year-old fled from Liberia to Ghana at age 4, living in various refugee camps for 9 years. In Ghana, she worked as a volunteer to build schools and advocate for children with special needs. Due to Conto's humanitarian work, she was given a Strongheart Fellowship, through which she was able to launch her line of jewelry called Akawele.
Sounds inspiring, but beneath the headline, it's the same dynamic as the lemonade stand. A child expected to bear the weight of adult responsibility long before they're ready.
Next Thursday, Conto may be recognized for her efforts on a global scale. She is a finalist for the International Children's Peace Prize. Bishop Desmond Tutu will announce the winner at a ceremony at The Hague.
That prize included a $100,000 award. She didn't win, but the nomination alone sounds impressive. It also raises questions. What qualifies a teenager for a peace prize? Is selling jewelry to fund an unaccredited nonprofit an act that creates world peace? Or simply compelling PR? And who decides which stories are elevated? Again, Lovetta appears on another global stage, this time invited to speak with the Dalai Lama.
We would like to invite the youngest member, Lovetta Conto, survivor of a refugee camp, 16 years old. She is with us for this dialogue.
Thank you for being here. I've been through a lot of things in my life as a kid, but I've learned how to overcome it and learn how to grow faster. And
International Peace Prize, Desmond Tutu, Dalai Lama, these are big-time prestigious names. So how did a little girl from a refugee camp catch their attention? When she was 4 years old, Lovetta Conto became a refugee of Liberia's civil war. Separated from her mother, she fled with her father and walked to safety in Ghana. Conto recounted her story to a class of high schoolers in the U.S.
Conto told the students of her first-hand experiences with the hundreds of child soldiers scarred by war, children forced into becoming slaves, and a society plagued by poverty and hunger. Some students looked away, finding the raw content difficult, while others intently watched her face. And then she smiled, the smile illuminating her whole being, allowing the resilient, confident young woman to shine through. It's that inner resilience that Stern first recognized upon meeting Conto and that contributed to selection as the first fellow of the Strongheart program.
That presence, the way she could hold an audience, was described in other profiles as inner resilience. But another word for it might be talent. She had poise, a striking visual presence, qualities a seasoned producer or super agent would notice immediately. In what looks like her first major print profile, Lovetta is introduced this way.
Her skin, a dark, rich brown that glows, is reminiscent of an elite model, and when her face breaks into a smile, I can see this girl being plastered on the covers of fashion magazines.
It raises an uncomfortable question. Was the Strongheart program about rescuing children or scouting talent? Out of thousands of refugees, the one chosen just happened to have fashion model beauty and an effortless sense of style? To me, it reads less like random chance and more like a producer's instinct. In 2008, in that same article, Cori was asked what propelled her to start Strongheart.
I was a Strongheart kid. I did not have an easy childhood and at one point was even homeless. I have always wanted to create a house where kids from challenging situations could come together and plant strong and healthy roots within themselves and each other. When I met Lovetta, I knew it was time to fulfill that dream.
It's a powerful story, but it also highlights a pretty big structural gap. Cori's only stated qualification for operating a residential program for traumatized youth was her own history of hardship. Lived experience can inspire empathy, but it isn't a professional credential. Surviving trauma isn't the same as being trained to treat it. And that does matter. We've seen how news articles describe their relationship, but how does Cori describe meeting the girl she now calls her daughter?
When I met Lovetta, she was 12 years old and living alone in a refugee camp. She had more emotional and social intelligence than anyone I'd ever known. I fought for her fiercely, convinced if the U.S. Embassy would just give me a visa for her, the world would open, neural pathways would shift. We'd have a leap, a miracle, a deep transformation. Of course, I thought that would happen for her, never considering it would also happen to me.
That statement isn't just sentimental, it's profoundly revealing. Idealizing a child as the key to one's own transformation blurs the boundaries between caregiver and subject, an entanglement of identities, and a textbook example of adultification. For donors, it may sound inspiring, but for the child, it creates impossible pressure to keep performing. The original fundraising pitch.
We've worked intensively to set up our Strong Heart program, knowing that Lovetta will be the first of many young people to benefit from our work. I'll be providing housing, but we have additional expenses that we're seeking partners to help cover. These are related directly to her. We're all volunteer. Would you be willing to help us? Any amount would be helpful. Example, $5 will allow us to buy a phone card so that she can call home. We have a complete but lean budget that we can share with anyone who is interested. Our total budget is $14,385 for the year. Not too much to change someone's life and sense of what is possible forever.
If your starting point is asking the public to cover a child's basic right to maintain contact with her family, that's not charming, it's a red flag. Article 9 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is explicit. States and parties shall respect the right of the child who is separated from one or both parents to maintain personal relations and direct contact on a regular basis. This leads to practical questions that any legitimate youth program should be able to answer easily. Was a home study visit conducted before bringing Lovetta to the U.S.? Were all adults in the home background checked? Who handled follow-up visits? And how often, if any? Was the host family financially independent? Or were they dependent on the fundraising tied to the child's story and labor? These aren't gotcha questions. They're basic child welfare protocols. Refugee children are one of the most vulnerable classes of people in the world. Standard programs working with displaced minors must have things like written host family agreements, formal child safety policies, mandatory reporting procedures, and probably most importantly, qualified staff, licensed mental health professionals, case managers, program directors. From the available records and the Strong Heart staff's own public writings, there's no evidence that any of those systems were in place. And in some cases, there's evidence that the systems were absolutely not in place. And that absence matters because the story might sound heartwarming, but the private reality is often very different than the public narrative. In writing about her newest recruit, the director said,
"She's coming here as the first participant in a program that has been my own lifelong dream, and which I'm launching with a group of wonderful fellow adventurers called the Strong Heart Fellows Program."
She describes this as fulfillment of her lifelong dream, here and in other places. Now, this is odd, given that her resume doesn't list any of the relevant training or qualifications that would be required to start and run a care home for children with complex psychological needs. Normally, caring for traumatized or displaced minors requires certified training and oversight from licensing bodies that can enforce professional standards. Those mechanisms exist, precisely to prevent harm that is unethical, but doesn't rise to the level of criminal conduct. But perhaps her co-founder has the appropriate credentials. The co-founder of Strong Heart Fellowship is Zoe Adams. Zoe Adams and the director were contemporaries at Saban Entertainment. Adams was Haim Saban's first executive assistant.
He's scary. He taught me how to be scary.
And then a founding member of HR before being promoted to the head of human resources. It's worth asking what that particular background brings to a trauma recovery program. In most large corporations, HR departments are tasked primarily with risk management and legal protection for the company. They're generally quashing complaints, not addressing them fairly and ethically. It goes without saying that that lens does not translate well to therapeutic or humanitarian environments. Public resumes for both founders show no credentials in mental health care, child development, social work, or cross-cultural trauma training. Yet, according to the organization's own materials, they were able to gain custody of multiple refugee children over a period of several years. It's clear that Strong Heart was created not by trained clinicians, but by two former television executives. That raises procedural questions. Does the UN typically grant custody of minor children to an unaccredited nonprofit organization without licensed staff or a source of funding other than the child's labor? If not, why did they make an exception here? And how often are exceptions like that being made? I tried to contact the UN to ask some of these questions, but their system is so opaque it's difficult to even find names or contact information for officials. The only person I actually got through to referred me to another department, and they never replied. Sometimes creating a bureaucracy so dense that accountability just disappears inside it is an effective technique to frustrate whistleblowers. I could make a tip to their abuse or fraud line, but at this point, I honestly don't know if the UN is complicit in this, because I know that a senior advisor to the UN who was nominated by President Obama was promoting Strong Heart on a national platform. And that UN advisor? Cheryl Saban, the wife of Haim Saban.
Episode brought to you by Unconscious Conditioning. Just keep doing the same thing over and over and never learn from your mistakes. I'm sure it will work out this time.
The actual descriptions of the Strong Heart program were glowing but vague. Quote, a personal growth and resiliency program for adolescents from war-torn backgrounds. Quote, a groundbreaking healing and learning guidance program. Quote, a loving and supportive place to heal from trauma. These words paint a picture of children learning in a safe, nurturing environment, supported by trained caregivers, free of anxiety. That's the image I had in my mind. The director later explained the structure this way.
During their residency, each recipient will work to create, plan, and execute a social entrepreneurial project to benefit others. The project will be a development through enterprise venture that will be triple bottom line, benefiting the fellow, their peers, and their community. Additionally, the recipients will receive the highest quality academic education through scholarship.
It sounds visionary. Everyone profits. But it raises a basic question. Who actually owns the profits? Did Lovetta have a bank account? Did she control any of the money raised in her name? Lovetta described her project simply.
Strong Heart is an organization created to develop young kids who have been through a lot of things in their lives. I'm the first Strong Heart Fellow. For my Strong Heart project, I had to do something to develop my life and how to support me in my well-being and people around me. So I decided to make jewelry made from bullets from the Liberian Civil War.
While she turns hundreds of spent bullet casings into leaf jewelry, the director sets up a press blitz to promote the jewelry line. This is the director's most successful press tour yet. Lovetta and her jewelry are featured in dozens of outlets, online and in print, including O, the Oprah magazine, Glamour, and Elle, as well as LA Times, MTV, CNN, dozens of others. She's also endorsed by major celebrities, and it appears that Angelina Jolie has taken an official studio portrait to promote the jewelry. That's in 2009, at the height of Angelina's popularity. Angelina Jolie served as a special envoy for over 20 years for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Is that how she got connected with Strong Heart? And did she take an official press photo wearing that jewelry, or was it photoshopped? Because I can't find any other pictures that look like they came from a similar photo session. So I have to wonder, did Strongheart set up and pay for that photo shoot? Did the UN set up and pay for that photo shoot? Did Angelina set up and pay for that photo shoot? It might seem like a nitpicky question, but you'll never go wrong when you follow the money. The official narrative is one of redemption from suffering, life after death, healing after heartbreak. But is that Lovetta's actual reality? I can't help but note that constant travel to jewelry shows and speaking engagements, meeting lots of people that she'll never see again, those kinds of things are the opposite of providing stability, routine, stable attachments. She goes to school online from the director's couch or dinner table, and in one interview she mentions not having any friends. In another, she mentions feeling alone inside. What else does Lovetta say about this time in her life? Does she agree with the assessment that she has more emotional and social intelligence than most people? Here she is talking about life in the refugee camp.
It was really hard growing up in this little refugee camp, and you feel like there's no hope at all. I was 12 years old kid. It was too much for me to handle. I was like, I don't know what to do. And everybody thought I was happy because I always act like the happy little girl, but it's like deep down in me, all those pains that I held in so much because I felt that I was strong enough to just swallow everything.
Lovetta's reality doesn't really match the fundraising narrative. This glossy narrative of healing and transformation just masks a teenager overwhelmed by isolation, culture shock, and post-traumatic stress. Already there's a difference in the narrative between Lovetta's actual experience and the fundraising story that the director tells. It won't be the only one. Reminiscing on Lovetta's arrival in a blog post, the director says,
"It hasn't been easy. We, myself and the amazing Strongheart team, had to weather storms of finances and hold fast during our fellows' difficult emotional transition from brave but traumatized survivor to strong, resourceful visionary. She's been a source of incredible joy and at times challenging growth, forcing me to personally re-examine my ideas about where my compassion begins and ends. What is solidarity? What is charity? What is right for one little girl? And what is the right path for me to make best use of the years I have on this planet?"
Those are reflections that should have happened before bringing a traumatized child halfway across the world, away from all of her family and friends. Did Cori truly understand what normal adolescent development looks like? Was she prepared to help Lovetta navigate through culture shock, puberty, all while becoming a public figure? Because it sounds to me more like someone who is expecting constant gratitude and performance of happiness and healing. On her blog, she wrote triumphantly about a 16-year-old Lovetta.
She healed. When she came to us, it wasn't easy for her or us. Months and months of work by all of us, talking, being listened to, firm boundaries, unyielding loving presence, combined with teaching her about how the brain actually works, the science behind it, had a profound effect. She's a different person now, with a level of emotional intelligence and health that surpasses many people who don't come from a traumatized background. She's open and strong, and willing to tell her story, to help other people move past their own pain into a new life.
Wow, that's an astonishing result. Better than most therapists could ever hope for. So how does 17-year-old Lovetta feel about it?
I've watched my country suffer so much. Sometimes I freak out when I'm in this country because I feel like the past is still coming back to me. I feel like I'm walking on a land that there's so many blood that was shared here. It's not easy. It's not easy sitting even in this house that once had a lot of guns. People packed their guns here. And you know what our guns did to a lot of people. It's really hard.
Let's be real. No child or human can process the trauma of war and displacement completely before the age of 18. The claim of full healing is nothing but marketing. And it isn't just unrealistic. It's almost a scary admission of how ill-prepared the Strongheart team was to deal with these children's complex needs.
Standing before the packed gymnasium, Conto told the middle schoolers she still has occasional nightmares about what happened during the war. It doesn't go away, she said, but she's striving to turn the adversity into something constructive. A boy at Monday's assembly asked what it feels like to pick up the bullet casings. Conto said it's strange. "I'm holding a bullet, and I don't know who it killed," she said. "It's a really weird feeling to have in your hand."
The jewelry is framed as an emblem of hope. Good things can come after bad. But each one is also a reminder of murder. That dissonance Lovetta voices, "I'm holding a bullet and I don't know who it killed," that shows the unresolved, unsettling reality that's underneath the polished marketing message. Is it possible, or maybe even likely, that constantly handling these symbols of harm, and not even symbols, but actual elements of harm, was more re-traumatizing than it was healing? The message of that necklace is supposed to be, good things can come out of bad things. But the good thing isn't justice or accountability. It's a necklace, a consumer good, a performative symbol. And it takes focus away and meaning away from repair and restitution at a systemic level and redirects it towards consumption. We Americans love consumption, but we can't consume our way out of the problems that we've created. It occurs to me that a spent bullet casing with the word life stamped on it is literally labeling things the opposite of what they are. A total inversion of truth. A bullet that may have killed someone stamped with the word life is an inversion of truth, labeling death as life, harm as healing, exploitation as empowerment. That inversion of truth becomes a recurring theme, a hallmark of the Strong Heart story, promotion of a public narrative that runs opposite to the private reality. That's a theme I noticed in my own relationship with her, and we'll return to it again. Following up with her supporters, the director writes,
"It's been an amazing 3 years. Lovetta is now a key part of our program and a true team member. When she's not traveling or speaking, she lives in Liberia and is constantly working to improve her life and the lives of those around her. This first phase of our program literally helped us shape a template, a how-to manual for transforming the lives and minds of young people of great promise, but with challenging backgrounds. We now have our proof of concept that will let us scale up and make real change possible for so many other amazing young people."
Proof of concept is a term borrowed from business and tech startups. It doesn't have anything to do with child welfare. It implies a prototype, not a person. In the organization's 2008 tax filing, which is the first one I can find, even though there should be some for 2006 and 2007, it describes phase one like this.
"She has learned how to let go of the limiting factors of her past war and refugee experiences."
Okay, reality check. Letting go is not a therapeutic goal in any recognized trauma recovery framework. It's a Western erasure of trauma, not an integration. Evidence-based trauma care focuses on integration, safety, and stabilization, not erasure, not repression, not pretending that it didn't happen or that it's not affecting you anymore. Letting go sounds comforting to donors, so they don't have to grapple with the ongoing reality of how this violence continues to affect people's life. We would rather believe that, oh, they're healed, we can buy their necklace, and life is a fairy tale, and everything is better, and we all live happily ever after the end. But that's not how real life works. The next part of the tax form is even more revealing.
"Become financially self-sufficient so that she can move herself out of survival mode and have the ability to care about and help others."
Okay, this is a huge and alarming red flag. Why does the curriculum include getting Lovetta financially independent? Why is financial independence a target for a child? Caregivers sustain minors, not the other way around. No credible child welfare system sets financial independence for a minor as a phase one goal emerging from trauma. This is neoliberal version of bootstrapping your way out of systemic violence. Framing it as moral, quote, so she can care about others, is manipulative. It's equating survival with selfishness, which is especially grotesque when you remember that it's aimed at a 15-year-old child who has spent most of her life destitute in a refugee camp. There is an international standard. You can check the UN Child Rights Convention and UNICEF. That standard is support access to livelihood training for youth transitioning to adulthood in a safe, non-exploitative environment. That's definitely not what's happening here. And it says that she now is financially independent, but it doesn't say how. Does she have a work permit and a job at the local McDonald's? Does she have her own bank account and transportation? Or is that referring to the jewelry that she makes? Because if Lovetta's jewelry business is supposed to sustain her, why does Strongheart report the money on its tax returns? Is Lovetta ever paid for her work? I tallied up several years of tax returns, and Strongheart reported over $300,000 gross in jewelry sales. Where did that money go? The official explanation was that Lovetta Strongheart Project, the jewelry line, funds her education and the Strongheart House, which is going to be phase 2. But that phrasing blurs a pretty big ethical line. When a minor's labor funds the organization that houses her, the relationship stops looking like mentorship and starts looking like exploitation. In most systems, that's exactly what child labor protections are designed to prevent. Meanwhile, the director often emphasized her own financial precarity.
I've way overspent my budget because of the riots shutting down the city and delaying my exit. I don't even know how I'm going to pay my hotel bill. We're just praying he'll give us a discount on our room since we've been here for a week beyond what we had planned for. He has a killer business sense, and I'm not sure there's much negotiating to be done here. Anyway, if we don't get the discount, we're going to have to forget the plane or bus tickets and hitchhike to the border. Just kidding, Mom. If you're interested in helping, I have a PayPal account you can send the donation through. Everything is so expensive in this country, I guess because of the war. I don't mean to be such a whiner. We've been staying in our hotel for free for the last week because the hotel owner wants to help us get these 2 kids out, and we couldn't afford it otherwise. But dang, there are some challenging things about this country. P.S. Mom, please don't worry, I'm fine. I even had time to finish writing the script, which might help me pay my rent. See, civil unrest can be useful.
She didn't have a full-time job, and a freelance producer's paycheck is rarely reliable. She represented herself to me and to others in the cast as broke. So who was supporting whom? If Strongheart's operating costs were covered by a child's creative labor and story, that's not empowerment, that's exploitation wearing a halo. Why is someone in a financially precarious position allowed to rotate through a stable of refugee minors used as fundraising props and free labor? And where did all that money go? Next time on The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up. The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up is written, produced, and narrated by me, Micah Ringo, drawn from the public record, verifiable sources, and my own experience. You can find supporting documentation in the show notes. Join me for a new episode each Saturday.